Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So, yeah, thanks for the intro. My name is Habib Mankal. I'm part of the O365A team, along with Curtis, Michael, and Dino. So in today's session, we're thankful to have the organizers, or a couple of the organizers for TeamsFest, so Chris and Vesa. Thanks for coming on. So as you know, everybody knows in the world today, there's no more in-person events happening, so everything has gone virtual. And so we did have a podcast recording with the team last month as to what TeamsFest is about and such. So we wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive in this session as to how the team went through the motions with regards to event registrations, virtual sessions and structure, attendee versus speakers, recordings and post-processing, and maybe just some lessons learned. And Vesa was just talking about some of those things just before the session started as well. So it's really good. And then basically, yeah, we want to start out, and I think I'm going to pass it over to Michael. Actually Curtis, to talk about event registration. So we'll start off there. You're on mute, Kurt.
He's muted, yeah.
It is still morning here.
Yeah, so hi everybody. Thanks for attending. And as Habib said, why I find this so interesting is a lot of people are starting to host virtual events, of course, on Teams. And on the surface, it looks easy, but there's a number of considerations. Chris and Vesa, I'm sure you guys have lived this extensively for the last 6 months. So one of the very first things I'm interested in is any sort of event starts with registration, and there's a couple of different options. I've seen some events use a third party called Eventry. You can use third party services like Event Hub or Sessionize to allow the registrants to actually register for the event. It looks like you guys settled on Event Hub for registrations for TeamsFest, but can you talk about some of the considerations you had and why you landed on Event Hub? Maybe I'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, of course. So we've done the TeamsFest twice before this, so this is actually our third TeamsFest, and we've learned lessons from it each and every time. And when we've done the first two TeamsFests, what we did actually is set up a web page, put direct links, and then people joined, and there wasn't any registration process whatsoever. This time around, from feedback based upon the last TeamsFest, it was really important to have a little bit more of a defined registration process, just in terms of having people get their calendar entries so that they could join from their calendars, making the process a lot more easier, but also as well trying to get an idea of the numbers that we would actually have. So what happened in the end was we knew that 2,500 people had registered for this event in the end, whereas in previous conferences we had absolutely no idea who was actually going to show up on the day. So by getting this kind of running number, we could start to kind of define what it is that we were actually doing on the day. So I give you an example. Right up until quite recently, we were deciding whether to go ahead with Teams meetings or live events, and getting an idea of the number gives you an idea of the capacity and the format. Vesa, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, of course, when we were thinking about how we are going to build up the registration, we went through some of the other options as well, like scouting through what kind of services there would be for use. And as TeamsFest goes without any sponsors, so we don't have any money involved in there, we don't have any funding in this, we thought that, okay, perhaps we need to do this in Microsoft way or in Teams way, something lightweight, something that utilizes the M365 capacity as well. So it was kind of perhaps some kind of experiment, but also the money side there. Okay, we want to do this simple and we don't want it to cost anything. So we started to create our own process from there.
Well, one of the things I really liked about it was simple. And I've seen some other events where it hasn't been so simple, so that was a huge plus. So your overall experience with Event Hub has been good. Has there been any big challenges with it, or it's just largely worked as advertised?
It's largely worked as advertised. I mean, I think that a lot of events that I've been to over the course of this year has kind of almost focused on the metrics, on the actual, just solely and quite narrowly on the volumes. Whereas we try to look at it from the perspective of people that have actually gone to these online virtual events. And what people really actually want to see is they want to see a frictionless join experience. So, one click and in. We've also seen a lot of events as well give out secondary kind of passwords and login credentials to their kind of other environments. And I can understand that from the perspective is that they might want to do it in a completely different Teams instance than what is their own or another that they've set up. But it's putting barriers in the way of people being able to join and consume that content. People want, and expect a very clean, easy, frictionless experience, and that's what we've concentrated on. So we didn't want to make it kind of put too many barriers in the way, but at the same time, we didn't want to make it too much of an effort for people to be able to come along and participate.
Yeah, no, I think you definitely achieved that. So good. That's good information for people looking to host this type of event. Let's move on to some bigger decisions. How you structure the event in terms of, do you use Teams live events or Teams itself? Michael, why don't you kick us off with that topic?
Yeah, maybe jumping before that, I was just wondering, you were talking about, no sponsorship. Did you guys play with Microsoft Bookings, and was there any, deficiencies in that before kind of evaluating a third party?
In terms of, do you want to go first, Vesku?
No, we didn't look at Bookings as a registration way. Because we wanted to be sure that we can change the URLs and do the changes later. Because when we started for the registration process, we were still leaving it open how we are going to do these sessions. Because we thought, okay, it might be the Teams meetings, but again, it ended up that we had some changes there, and so we wanted to leave it open until we just decided what it's going to be.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that Ignite feature with the event registration that's going to come kind of in-house, how that would be maybe used in TeamsFest number 4, coming up. So yeah, let's talk
very
about...
likely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of, whether you have sponsors or not, from the very beginning, we wanted this to be a 100% community event. We've gone to Ignite, we've personally presented there, and we've seen that there is a big side of it that is all the vendors and the vendors trying to get your time and attention to come along and promote their products. And we wanted to give people a break from that with the experience. We wanted to make it about Teams, and we wanted to make it about the content, as opposed to it almost being double blindsided. So you would go to sessions and really under the hood, they were trying to kind of sell you something or to get that engagement. We, as Vesku, myself, Adam, we're all passionate about Teams and learning more about Teams, and we decided right from the very start of TeamsFest, when we done the first one, that we would move forward without kind of corporate sponsorship. We've also heard some horror stories as well of people being, how can I put it, nailed with their feet to the floor by their corporate sponsors in terms of what the session catalog is like. And again, we wanted to have a little bit more creative freedom in the event and kind of be the masters of our own destiny. And when we kind of invited all the speakers or went through that call for speakers, we were really confident that we could 100% select the sessions that we thought that the audience would want to see, and we would be able to do so with our friends. I mean, just take one of the TeamsFest sessions this morning. So we had Craig Chiffers one of the session, number 1, doing the session on his motorbike, going through Sydney, doing that session. That would never, ever be able to happen within a corporate event, because the corporate sponsors would say, wow, that's too wacky, that's off the wall. But because we're kind of in the masters of in our own control, we can experiment with things that are not so orthodox.
So just to be clear, that was planned
as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing session, right? I mean, some people, you know, I think we're a little bit thrown by it, because they come along to the sessions and think, right, this is just going to be kind of, you know, we're going to see the slide and we're going to hear from the slides and we maybe have a little bit of a demo. But no, I mean, he got on his motorbike and went straight through. He was even stopping at the traffic lights and explaining how to build auto attendance whilst going down. Now, whether that's right or wrong, you know, I don't know, but it is certainly a creative way of doing things, and we absolutely love that, because it's bringing the personality to the event.
Kurt, you're gonna have to up the game.
Yeah, I'll have to record a podcast on your bike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about the event structure. So you use the registration to kind of get an understanding of how many attendees were going to come. So you kind of held it off to near the end on if you were going Teams meetings versus live events. I know the keynote was done with a live event. Maybe some thoughts around, you know, maybe just kind of around that keynote first on why you chose live event versus an online meeting.
Yeah, I can take this one. The live event was chosen because we had that 2,500 people registered. Yeah. At that point, when we chose that, we had over 2,000, and that's when we decided, okay, we really have to do this as a live event. And when we realized that the meeting overflow isn't coming, the advanced communication, we were preparing for that, and kind of hope perhaps. We were very optimistically hoping for that. So in that way, we would have done that as well with the meeting with overflow capacity. And that's kind of the simplicity is one of the key things here, and to make it easily interactive. We all know what's the issues usually with the live events, because that has some admin or management hustle. Easily you have to have the producers and presenters there. So we wanted to make it a bit more simpler, and that applies to the meetings as well. We kind of guessed that we have 8 tracks, so we wouldn't be reaching out 300 in a single room very easily, even with that number of people joining, registering, because we all know not everyone is going to show up, and that's why we wanted to do it. And we were lucky to have the hard mute out kind of today in this tenant. And that's kind of the eased the sessions, but we were preparing with the moderators that they would just be muting up people. And our last 2 TeamsFests were very successfully, even without a hard mute. They were all done in Teams meetings. So that's we have a lot of faith in our speakers, and we have faith in our audience as well, because they have done, they behave marvelously.
Yeah, and I think we're over probably 30 sessions into the event. You have eight rooms or 8 tracks, or however you want to look at it. How do you decide on how many parallel sessions you want to run at the same time? Was that just based on the content that came in?
Wow, that's an interesting question. When we very first started out, we were going to go for an event that was roughly the same size as the last one. So if anyone attended the last one, there were 5 tracks and 50 sessions. And the submissions that we had for TeamsFest this time around went up by about 300%. So we got somewhere close to 250 submissions from all around the world. Last one we had 70. It really exploded, and we had to get kind of quite creative around, because we want to be inclusive. We want to have the breadth of the Teams community globally represented within this event. So we did it a few ways. We decided to expand the tracks, so that went from 50 and then it went up to 60, and then it went up to 70, and then it went up to 85. We didn't want to do a multi-day event, because multi-day events, we hear a lot about attrition over multi-day events. Unless you're somebody like Microsoft that has the kind of the brand power to kind of keep people's attention and keep on going back, you would have like big day ones, and then it would slope off gradually over the course of each day. But also, everyone is so massively busy. So we expanded from 5 to 8 tracks, we expanded from 50 to 85 sessions, and that's really how it came about. As the kind of the sessions were coming in the registration, we decided, no, we're going to have to go bigger, otherwise we're going to have to let a lot of other people down in order to be able to come along. And we didn't feel like we wanted to give like 200 rejections. So that really governed the way we were thinking.
Yeah, and I think some features that came out, around the Ignite time, like the meeting options, the hard mute, spotlight, I think that probably took a little bit of load probably off the moderating of all those sessions, especially in parallel. But how did you decide on how you're going to moderate, 8 parallel sessions, and how you're going to kind of rotate through that through all the 85 plus?
Again, going back to the last conference, we basically did all of the admin and moderation ourselves. So between Vesku, myself, Adam, and Chris Webb, we managed to run all the tracks, do all the recordings, do all the video, somehow managed to post up in all of the sessions. And it was mad. It was it was a crazy day, and expanding it beyond the limit, we had to make the decision to go with dedicated moderators in order to be able to create a nice, good flow. Like you say, Michael, the features such as hard mute coming in really do help from a moderation, the presenter and attendee roles, because they weren't there for the last one either. But at the same time, in each track, you need somebody to man the chat, to be able to give attendees the attention, to ask the questions, whilst at the same time have a really great performance as a speaker as well. So in the last kind of session, the speakers turned around also and said, look, we could do with a little bit more support. And having attended things like Ignite or Inspire, Microsoft were doing it whereby you had the dedicated speaker, you had the dedicated moderator, and they were almost working in pairs and in tandem, so that the moderator would introduce the speaker, the moderator would ask questions back at the speaker at the end, and that really worked out well. So that's something that we wanted to emulate.
No, that's excellent. And I'm interested to see how your team incorporates overflow meetings, when that gets released, and being able to scale beyond 1,000 and how that all works. But maybe I'll throw it over to Dino to talk about, kind of the different roles.
Yeah, and just in following up on the structure of the event, maybe, I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about like the attendees versus speakers in terms of how people are joining. We joined today as guests. Like, what were the considerations? What worked well? What, you're just over halfway through this event. So maybe you can speak to, what happened last year versus coming into this year in terms of decisions were made, in terms of how people were going to join, and what you're seeing so far in terms of how it's worked out. In terms of allowing your guests to join all the different sessions.
Okay, if comparing to the last time, we didn't have any difference here. Basically, we had the join links on the last time as well. So we already made it as easy as possible for the attendees and for the speakers to join in and enjoy the show or start presenting. So that's one of the key things, and I think one of the biggest changes is that we have those moderators we already talked about, and we have a kind of larger organizations through that. We are not a huge organization. There's just 4 of us in the main organizer core, and then there's the basically 9 moderators with 1 backup. And because we do things very lightweight, it kind of allows us to make quick switches. What we did differently this time, we had the room URLs short-linked. We talked about this before this even started, and there's this thing, one in, I don't know in what chance that when the short-link service breaks down, then of course thinking about the backups for the next time. So we are learning all the time. We are taking those learns. We had perhaps a better focus on the time zones this time. We had more about, so we know people are more aware about okay, what is the time zone, what we are talking about, paying extra attention there. I've been talking about that during the summer as well in some cases, because that's a big thing when you are joining in international events or in global events.
And to just add to Vesa's point, I remember Vesku, Adam, myself and Chris having a meeting a couple of months back where we were making some decisions, and we had been to CommsVerse, we had been to the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon, we'd been to Galactic Summit, we were either speaking there ourselves or attending. And there's a big part of this, I think, that it sometimes is a trade-off between the technology and the people. I think this time around, we kind of shifted more towards the people and the experience. So how easy is it for somebody to come into work and then click on the link to join? What does, after the session, what is that experience like? What is it like moving from room to room? What is it like kind of post-event, or what is the feedback form experience like? It's taken into consideration how easy it is to make to people. And that, you know, sometimes comes in an expense as the technology. You know, we are only 4 people. We're kind of restricted because we all have jobs and we only have a certain amount of time to kind of devote to the conference. I give you an example. So CommsVerse, they had the VR, the alt space, and that was really, really cool. And we would love to do that. But at the same time, we kind of felt in this time around, because people are doing so many virtual events, that we really wanted to make it about the people and put people very much at the center of the experience, easy to join, easy to learn. Maybe for the next one, we'll shift that back slightly and we'll introduce some of the new tech. But for us, you know, people were the overriding factor in this one for sure.
Oh, that's cool. A couple things. Have you had any issues with more than 300 people joining a session, or has that been, how have you dealt with that? And it looks like we've got, just checking the roster now, we've got, I think 50 people, 34 attendees in this meeting. Has there been any concern at all with overflowing meetings, or?
Actually not. So I think that the highest session that we've gone up to for the whole day so far has been roughly somewhere, I think close it was to 190 people. So in the keynote, we had 500-600. And then after that, but I guess that's part of the kind of capacity planning. So that was a big reason why we chose the live event, because we had to kind of say, if all 2,000 or 2,500 people showed up, we didn't want like 2,000 of them not to fit in the room. But let's say, for example, that if you can't get into one session, there are several other sessions to be able to attend on the day that also have 300 capacity. And if we take all 8 rooms side by side, that would end up being around about 2,500. So that was a kind of almost a secondary concern. And because we're doing everything on demand too, that, you know, is something that we can also kind of issue and direct to our YouTube page later
on. And one more a good question here from one of the guests. Any thoughts on how you will integrate breakout rooms into the next TeamsFest?
Do you want me to take a guess on that? I don't know. Probably we are not. Because as the breakout rooms they are now, they are automatic more or less, or you would have to manually start assigning people, and it's not the way to do it. So in this kind of events, it's more towards the school rooms on when you want to really brainstorm something, split people into smaller groups. But perhaps if there are sessions like more interactive sessions. Hey, okay, this is that kind of session that is going to have a need for that. Perhaps it will be then used as a kind of a sub-session on the track. And it will allow that possibility if those attendees in that session would go into different rooms, come back with some ideas, it increase of course, the interactivity and create a different kind of this experience in these events.
And,
Yeah,
and the technology could develop in that time too. So let's take, for example, you've got virtual breakout rooms today, and you've got meeting extensions that is coming in. So for example, if you had like an app where it could throw up on the front of the screen to allow people to select the breakout room that they want to attain, like take to the next session, then that would come into our thoughts about the whole experience. And I don't want everyone on or in this session to think that Vesku, myself, Adam, and Chris are completely aligned about everything. I mean, we sometimes we grind it out in terms of how we're going to do things going forward, but that's a really, really good thing, because if we were just all on the same page all the time, it would be a very dull experience. So what you're actually seeing in terms of this event and how we've done it, some things we've agreed on, but some things it's gone over 6 to 8 weeks of us like making the point, because we're really passionate about making this into a really great event.
That's great.
I need to know what is the biggest contentious decision that there was a battle on.
It was the keynote, I think. Was that right, Vesku, about doing the live event or doing a standard meeting right at the start of the keynote? And,
yeah.
I'm arguing with Vesku, saying no, it's 7 o'clock in the morning UK time, or it's 8 o'clock. It's really early. People are not gonna, that number isn't gonna exist. And then Vesku was like, no, you have to accommodate for everyone. And we are quite strong, like kind of strong personalities, Vesku and myself. We don't budge. Vesku is only kind of second to my wife in terms of thing. So but it worked out in the end, and sometimes you've got to kind of compromise on these things. I don't think apart from that, Vesku, did we have anything?
Probably nothing serious. It's been a crazy day, so I can't recall everything. And whenever we have decided on something, I think it's in the history, more or less. The keynote was quite recently reworked, so that's one of the reasons. Perhaps the use of NDI, OBS stuff that was discussed earlier as well. How do you want to do those? But that was also related to keynote mostly. And how do we want to do the kind of opening keynote and the ending sessions and that kind of information.
And also as well, I think I remember we had it out over Bitly versus Rebrandly links at one point. I think that got pretty heated for as much as it was worth. But all this stuff. I guess you guys know yourselves from you've got your ideas, you want to kind of champion them, and it's really good to have that dynamic. I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't want people to sit and and nod at everything that it works out well in the dynamic.
That's great. Thank you. I think we're going to pass it over to Hab, and he's going to talk about recordings and post-processing.
Yeah, so I think I just want to add, just maybe ask a question with regards to like the feedback form before we get into the post-processing and recording. What made you decide to just go with a single form as opposed to a form for each particular track?
Sorry, what do you mean with the single
form?
So
like versus... do you have is the feedback, like for the feedback form, right? Is it a single form, or is it one, or did you create a form for every room, I should say?
If we had a feedback form for every room, I think we might be risking that in speaker templates. Or something like at least one. If you have lots of that kind of options, that can be a bit risky. Of course, we could create a more smarter form, like maybe you could choose the room first or something like that. But as Chris said earlier, we are thinking about the people first. That's why you usually go with the person's name and then pick that up from the list.
But also as well, to add to Vescu's point, the limitations of how many people there are in order to be able to do these things, because it's a community event. Comes normally at the end of the working day or on weekends, and of course as people we also have to take into account family time as well. Now when we very first started this, right, when we did the first one, there was just me and Adam. There was the two of us, and Vescu was speaking then, and over time we've brought on Vescu, he joined us, and then Chris Webb joined us after that. And maybe for the next TeamsFest, one of the best things about this time around is having those dedicated moderators about being extensions of the team. The success has really been, I think, on the day, been down to them as opposed to being down to us. I mean, we've done the planning, but they're doing the actual doing. So next time around, I think that we're going to invest more in hopefully get more community involvement in actually running the day. The feedback from them has been excellent as well. So we have a few things like the feedback form that I think Habib, they're quite kind of harking back to the days where we didn't have so many people doing it. So what we did is try to do it in the shortest, quickest, easiest way, the kind of the least time intensive. And I think it'll be good to take a look at the feedback and see on that form, is this something we need to change? We do listen to feedback. The fact that we've got registration this time around, dedicated moderators for tracks, those were all things that were asked about last time. So we'll take all the feedback on board. It's really important.
Yes, we are a very lean organization, or we are thinking about this very lean, very agile way, because I think we are used terms like we do it the Teams way, like simple, quick, effective, very economical way in that sense. So we don't have to spend too much time on something like registration processes or things like that.
Perfect.
And also as well, do it with the Microsoft technology. We didn't want to be one of these kind of people that we're promoting Microsoft technology and at the same time using all these third-party add-ons for the experience. So we do it through forms. But I just wanted to cover that point. We try to kind of practice what we preach.
Oh, perfect. So now let's talk about the post-processing and recording, right? So every session is being recorded. So you're going to have 85 recordings, which is a substantial amount. You just mentioned that you have a lean team. How do you go about doing the post-processing, editing, and then uploading to the YouTube channel?
That's when our let's say magic guy comes in. Chris Webb did the hard work on that last time. And we are recording those in chunks, so we are not recording every single session and stopping and restarting. I think there's 2-3 sessions because the hard limit is 4 hours for Teams recordings. So we try to make it a bit shorter. So there's a kind of a chunks of recordings, and they will be then downloaded from stream. And Chris Webb is going to do the post-processing on them. But we are not spending on that too much time either. It's mostly about heads and tails style of editing and then uploading to the YouTube. So it's very lean in that sense, but yeah, it's a lot of work. And before Webb took that task, we spent a lot more time on that. He has a way more refined process than any of us had.
And we, from the very start when we organised this, I think it was May that we finally kick things off this year. We do have kind of rough defined roles for what it is that we actually do in the All Up event. So, for example, I myself am responsible for the choreography of it, there's the speaker selection of it, the putting together, the scheduling, the agenda, the securing of the talent, as it were, to be able to speak at the event. Vescu and Adam are mainly responsible for the building of the rooms the building of the links, I think it's everything apart from the website, which is myself, and Chris is really all up responsible for that post-recording piece. And we're all very comfortable with those roles. We kind of make sure that each one of us kind of know what that is and that we're happy with it, and we lead that kind of element. So I think roles are quite important to define right from the very start before, you know, doing an event, who ultimately the decisions can all be group decisions as well, but one person kind of heads up the particular aspects of the event.
So there's just so we have a question here from Matt, and I know we talked about the post-processing, but you talked about everybody having their own different role and doing their own thing. And so what is the percent-wise of like the work that you've done on TeamsFest, and how do you balance it with your own work? Because obviously you work for a living, and then everybody has family as well, right? So how does that sort of all mash together?
I'm not going to lie, some days are challenging in terms of some of the work. I think of, you know, you get kind of crush periods with it. So one such time is when the call for speakers ends, and you need to go and inform all the speakers, and you need to confirm the lineup and the schedule. That's very intensive period. In terms of the period immediately before the event, where you're checking the I's and dotting the T's and building the rooms and doing the social media, that is quite an intensive period too. And as you know, we've already discussed, it's going to be quite an intensive period for Chris and Adam in the days preceding to get all of those recordings done. But we try to load balance it the best that we can within. If one of us is having a tough time and saying, look, I just can't do that today, then the other person can step in and be able to take up the load. And the moderators too, they have already gone beyond, you know, they've reached out to say, look, is there anything I can help with? And I think that's really an important lesson that we've learned over the course of these three. Don't silo it. Don't kind of think that you have to own it to such an extent that you can't share it with people or get them involved in order to be able to do it. So I think that the next TeamsFest that will happen, and we're thinking kind of April, May next year in 2021. I think what we'll see for that right from the very start, there will be a lot more people that were involved. We'll get the moderators involved from the very start to be able to load balance that work. And spin it all up so that it doesn't, because family is so important. Obviously work's important to keep the money in as well. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so in a sense we are extending the days to some limit, but that's one of the reasons why we try to make this lean. We don't try to make it too complicated, because we have other obligations as well. So we just can't go 100% with this. And yeah, we are doing our best, but I don't think any of us can give a percentage-wise there, and because we just try to do our best in that situation to go that way. And that's one of the drivers. Do we do something more complicated or not? And the answer is usually no.
No, it's been awesome. I mean, definitely a lot of really good information for anybody who's looking to build their own virtual event or sessions and stuff like that. I think you know, understanding how you guys went about it, understanding how, you know, you tried to go more of this obviously the simplistic way, and because of the small team, definitely helps provide that insight, I think, for everybody on the call today, and hopefully for everybody listening and or watching the channel itself. So I think we're still here for another few minutes for some additional questions before the next session. So if you have a question, please put that in the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute, I guess.
And just to clarify something, Chris, all the scheduling was done with Sessionize, right? Like for both the attendees and the speaker.
That's right. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, right? The first kind of couple of times that we did this, it was done purely on the form in Microsoft Forms with the Excel hanging off the back of it. That's what, you know, we used to sit down and schedule it out that way. But this Sessionize is a great example and of an app outside of Microsoft 365 that is really designed for something like this. So I'm really excited to see where Teams goes in the future, particularly with this webinar registration. We've had talks with the product team to be able to push to be able to have more event features like this. I think that Microsoft, from the MVP Summit and running Inspire and Ignite over Teams, has suddenly realized that it was really, really effective an event tool. So these features like hard mute, like website registration, I think that they're going to be very, very big and popular in the future. So by the time that we get around to the next one, because the cadence is moving so fast, we may not need to actually use Sessionize at this point anymore. And I think that you have to, it's a constantly changing situation. So all throughout the process, you're evaluating about whether to do stuff and that. I'd love to say that we had a crystal clear picture of what this event today looked like back in May, but it's changed so many times over the course of the 5 months where we've had to accommodate for the speakers, the amount of people registering, the changes in technology, our personal timescales to be able to handle this. Those are all factors. I guess the most important insight is that it's such a dynamic situation, and please don't think that if it's different to what you originally thought it was, that it's a bad thing. It's not. I mean, it's turned out really good this time around.
Yeah, well, looking at some comments from the people attending this, everyone appreciated the simplicity, so that was fantastic. And Matt made a good point. Sessionize seemed to work really, really good. The one thing a lot of people would like is made it more clear that the time zone was localized in Sessionize. But other than that, it seemed to work really, really good.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Curtis. I mean, the time zones has been an issue for all three of our events. In terms of, do you know what? When we were first organising this, we used to do this in British summertime, and of course, the UK has left or leaving the European Union since then. And since we are the European Teams user group and TeamsFest, and Europe is our kind of principal audience, we shifted that around to Central European summertime. And I think we've been a little bit unlucky I don't know whether this is something to do with planning, but all of our events has happened around about the change in time zones. So it's changed from, to British summertime, or it's changed back out of to Greenwich Mean Time and so forth. So we've tried to do that. Sessionize has helped us. The Event Hub, which gives your session in your time zone, has really helped us. So a mix between this is much better. The first one that we did, it was absolute chaos of people, attending sessions. They'd turn up at the wrong session. So that's a continual work in progress.
Yeah, the last spring when we had the TeamsFest, we were thinking about the exact date too much, because it was just around the daylight saving time change, and that really confuses things up when things move 1 hour ahead or back, and that happened with Australia. I think this year we didn't think about that when their change is happening, so they had a bit of confusion in that end as well.
I tell you what, though, it makes you really good at calculating time zones in your head after a while. I'm a whiz. I'm a whiz for the. For America and Canada, that's absolutely fine. But where we have new speakers, I mean, we had a speaker that was, in the Philippines, for example, and so we have to, when they have a query and says, what time am I actually turning up? We still have to look at Google Time Zone Translator, occasionally.
Yeah, but what has changed with Chris is that he doesn't assume everybody is looking to British time zone anymore. He's making it more like of understanding that, okay, there are other time zones as well.
See, the empire was over long ago, and that's why we changed it in TeamsFest. Otherwise, people are getting the wrong idea.
You guys just gave me a great idea for a new Teams bot, though. Time translator.
Exactly. You could, if somebody designed me a power app that could fit into Teams, based upon a time zone, that would be awesome. That might be a Teams user voice for us.
I like it.
Kurt's on it.
All right. Well, we're at the time, I guess. It was a 45-minute session. Just closing remarks, Vescu and Chris, and thanks so much for coming on and sharing your experiences. But maybe just each of you, and not put you on the spot, but what's the biggest lesson learned this time around with hosting this event on Teams as a platform? Maybe I'll start with you, Vescu.
Well, I guess think what can go wrong even more deeply than before, and prepare some backups and be more precise about those. Prepare more material in advance. I guess that's perhaps that's from the more technical side here.
So just plans if something goes wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Chris?
Well, it's going to sound pretty cheesy and all, but I'll go back to the slogan. Together everyone achieves more, and this is the first one that we've gone outside of our original organizing group to do stuff, and it's worked all the better. Well
said. Which fits in with the spirit of Teams, so it's a good way to end it. All right, folks. Well, Habib, I don't know if you have any final closing remarks, or we'll just wrap it up.
No, I think it's been great. A lot of really great information, and hopefully some good takeaways for all the listeners and people on the call.
I definitely think so. Thank you very much for all of you. Thank you very much for Vescu and Chris for all the insights.